Thanks so much for being here at the Nashville Entrepreneur Center. My name is Zap, Z-A-P. I'm a contractor here focused on educating founders about capital, which I focus a lot. I'm like an expert in equity capital, but dangerous enough in debt, which is why I'm super excited to bring our two guests here to speak today, Kevin Roddey with Pinnacle and Jon Eisen with Pathway Lending, because they're the real experts when it comes to debt. I personally had a lot of questions coming up in office hours that I was like, we just need to all get together and learn about this and talk about it. But anyways, thanks so much for being here. One other thing to note, we do a capital office hours every Wednesday for 2 hours here. If you want to just come chat about any topic, it's pretty common. People come anywhere from idea to, hey, I'm trying to get this finance, like what could that look like? Feel free to come by my office. I'll send out that link after this. But anyways, I want to give a big round of applause to Kevin Roddey, and I'm going to give him the mic.
Set the bar a little high, calling me an expert. But we'll see if perception is reality, and I'll try to persuade you that I do know what I'm talking about in terms of debt as it relates to funding your business. So as a banker, I think it's a great idea. It's like asking the barber if you need a haircut. That's what we're here to do, is provide loans to small business owners and entrepreneurs who need it for a variety of reasons. And so what I want to do in the next 10 or 15 minutes is go through a prepared deck that goes through some points I'd like to make, keeps me focused and nothing else. Turn it over to my friend and partner from Pathway Lending, Jon Eisen, who is a great complement to what we do at Pinnacle, or what any bank does as it relates to loans. In some cases, many cases actually, they're more appropriate in terms of a debt solution. And then I'd like to open up to questions and even better a conversation. As Zap said, I really appreciate your effort to be here through this, through the weather, free checking for everybody as a small token of my appreciation. It's a little too early for corny bank jokes, isn't it? So anyway, ta-da. So let me get started with a brief commercial, if I may. Does this work, Zach? Where? Oh, is it on that one? Okay, cool. I'll just point in that direction. Just a brief word about Pinnacle Financial Partners. We are the largest bank based here in Nashville, started in 2000. We have grown into an organization that is now in 8 states, which is a fairly recent phenomenon. Until about 5 years ago, we were located exclusively in the state of Tennessee. And over the last 4 or 5 years, we've made an acquisition, we've done some lift outs, and we are now in 8 states in the Southeast, Jacksonville being the most recent location. I have been there for 15 years. March 2009 was the month that I started. And since that time, not only we have grown, but I think, as small business owners and entrepreneurs, my 15-year tenure is not unusual. We have a 95% retention rate, which I think is proof in the pudding that if you take care of your people, everything else takes care of itself, and they do a great job of doing that. And through that, if you have happy employees, theoretically, you have happy clients. So enough of the company Kool-Aid there, but we are currently roughly almost $50 billion in assets. Assets defined as the value of our loans. That is an asset to the bank. And so we're going to talk about how you would get a loan and the process we go through. So this is Jerry Maguire. Some of you probably too young to recognize this, but this reminds me of several clients during PPP. When 3 years ago you had the Black Swan event of PPP, we had clients that came to us looking for that government-assisted loan. And so, we were building a plane while trying to fly it, and we got it done. But this really, I think as many of you, right, as you're thinking about funding your business, you're thinking about the various sources to get the lifeblood of your business, namely capital. And there are a couple of options. There is, and it really is a function of risk-reward. On the least risky, cheapest form of capital, it's me on the bank side. We are a great option. If not out of the gate, then sometime through the life cycle of the company, we can be an option, and I'm going to show you how. On the inverse side, or on the other side of that risk-reward spectrum, you've got investors. They're paid to take the risk. They are using somebody else's money to make an investment in your company. And so for that, they are paid handsomely, much more than we are at the bank side, where our average margin is about 3%. But there are other sources as well when you're looking at your funds, and you know all this. Personal funds, SBA loans. I couldn't, but I've got colleagues and partners who could do an entire presentation on SBA lending, government guaranteed lending, and how it could be appropriate for business owners, early stage companies, for a variety of different reasons. You know, a bank loan, there are various types of bank loans, from a line of credit for working capital to a term loan to purchase a building or a piece of equipment. We look at them the same, and I'm going to walk you through that in a second. An asset-based line of credit. I'm going to walk you through the cash flow sort of analysis and calculation we do, but sometimes there isn't any cash flow, but you have a purchase order, you've got inventory. While we can't totally lend based on a purchase order or inventory, there are firms that do, and we've often referred people to them. And then investors, raising money in exchange for equity in your company or preferred rate on a debt instrument of some type. Again, that is something that I'm sure many of you have done. So we're warning in advance. You know, I love GIFs and memes, and so I Googled like funny banker meme, and this is the funniest thing I could find, which is sort of telling about our profession. But what I think it says is, not only are we looking to provide capital where appropriate, but we're also looking for a partnership. And that partnership can start with something as basic as a business checking account. I mean, I guess one of the worst kept secrets about our industry is deposits are our lifeblood. Capital is what you use, but deposits, and the way we make our loans, our source of capital is your deposits. So when you're talking to a bank, that is leverage you have from day one when you're talking to them, approaching them about a bank. But also keep in mind, that's what we're lending out. So that's why our debt is so cheap, or our capital is so cheap. We're not built to take risk. We're lending other people's money out, your money. And we have to be right 99.8% of their time. So I was just curious, 20 basis points. Can we be 20 basis points or wrong 20 basis points? So what's 20 basis points on $50 billion? Well, that's $100 million. If we lost $100 million, the feds would be in our face in our offices day one and shut us down, because they'd be wondering what we're doing with people's deposits and how we're making our lending decisions. So, this whole, you've heard the joke, and I think I've got one, get a loan when you don't need the money, or I only go to a bank when I can prove I can repay them 5 or 6 different ways. That's sort of the truth, because we are lending people's monies out. But I would suggest to you that even when you don't need the money, getting a line of credit or something like that is always a good idea. In our perspective, we are glass is half empty perspective. In other words, they say a business owner presents a pro forma, which always looks good. If you present me with a bad pro forma, it's automatic no, because you're not that smart. They always look parabolic and they always look good. But we, as bankers, have to rely on historic financial information because that's really the only certainty we have in making our banking and our credit decisions. But we also want to understand, be comfortable with what you think is going to happen. So the questions we ask before we even go through the first financial or perform the first calculation are really quantitative. It's quantitative and qualitative. This is the quantitative part. Can the debt be repaid in reasonable terms and conditions by the business? We will ask for and expect personal guarantees to help with the strength of that loan. But at the end of the day, can the business support the debt they currently have and the debt they're asking for? Has the borrower historically demonstrated the capacity to service the debt or pay money back? The way we figure that one out is by pulling a credit check. And I have seen many situations where you have a very strong business, but the business owner has horrible credit for whatever reason. And that credit, they file bankruptcy, that stays on your credit record for 7 years. So despite the fact that we may have a very strong business, the credit's not very good. what is the future performance going to look like? And do we have confidence in that business owner to execute? And if the repayment source, the primary source of repayment, which is that business, if that goes away, what do we have? Is there collateral? Is there a building? Are there assets that we can go after to get paid back? And that is a very important part of our decision. It's not something we can rely totally on. And I get this question all the time. I had somebody call me the other day that had just loose numbers. He had a $2 million building worth $2 million, and he wanted to borrow, I don't know, $400,000 or $500,000. Very small percentage of the value of the building. But the business it's only been around for 6 months. So my question back to him is, all right, how do we get the cash flow? Well, we're going to, I don't want to personally guarantee it. This was a doctor, so they never do. No offense to doctors in the room. But the point there to him was, we're not in the real estate business. We're in the banking business. We're in the business of making loans, getting that money back. I don't want to have to take over a building and try to sell it if you don't pay us back. And so if for no other reason, the regulatory environment requires that, but we do too, as just a prudent lender. So I don't want to get too caught up in the weeds but I want to give you a sense of what the cash flow calculation looks like. Pathway, I think, goes through a similar exercise. Every bank that you may speak with that is federally regulated goes through this exercise to figure out what is the cash flow of both the business as well as the business owner to be able to support the debt that is currently there and that they're requesting. And so bottom line, we're looking for the cash from the business, the free cash net of, or adding back the net income, adding back depreciation, interest, and rent. There's the cash flow for that year. There's the debt service, principal and interest for that particular company. We look at the business owner or the guarantor. This could be the business owner that's directly involved with the business, or somebody the rich uncle, or somebody that you've brought to the table to help with that lending decision. We go through the same exercise. And so what this shows you is that the debt service coverage for this particular deal is 2.62 times. What that says to a banker is there's $2.62 for a free cash flow of cash available to service debt for every dollar of debt. And typically banks look for 1.25. Other lenders like Pathway and others may look at a metric or a number less than that 1.25. But at the end of the day, we are looking for $1.25 of free available cash for every dollar of principal interest that you have to be able to support that debt and for us to make that decision. And then we go into, again, we're looking in the rear view mirror, but we're also making sure we understand and are comfortable with where the industry is going and where we think you're going as the business owner. And so there's a very brief questions. I'm sure you ask yourselves the question. If you're dealing with any capital source, especially investors, this is their perspective, looking at the future. And so what do we think about the future? How is the requested loan going to affect that? Can they pay us back? Does he or she have a track record of performing? When you're approaching a banker with a loan request or an investor, any source of capital, details are very important. The just because answer, actually I take that back. A line of credit, sort of a brief aside, as a business owner, if your cash flow is there, having a line of credit for working capital just because, at least to me, is an appropriate response. It's there to bridge the gap between payables and receivables, and typically you're asking for that when you don't need the money, which is the best time to approach a banker. So back to the 6 or 7 slides ago, a line of credit is probably the most common type of loan that I do to help business owners with their short-term capital needs. And just because I want it, I need it, and you never know, as long as cash flow is there, that's a perfectly acceptable answer to me, and I think it's a responsible one. What do you need? Again, and I'm wrapping up here, and I'll turn it over to John. This is the package that you would need for any banker to look at a loan request: business tax returns, personal tax returns, most recent financials, year-end preferably, a personal financial statement, which is your own personal balance sheet, which is a good exercise to go through regardless, but what does your income look like, assets and liabilities? And then, yeah, I'd like to see a pro forma. What do you expect the business to be? How do you expect it to perform? And, you know, from there we will make our decision. This pro forma, I think, is a good segue into Jon and Pathway Lending, because there are, you know, we're looking backward 85% of the time. Jon and Pathway Lending is a great example of a firm that can look forward a lot more than we can when they're making their lending decisions. So, care to take the mic? Thanks.
Thanks, Kevin, and thanks, Zap, for having us. Yeah, so I'll just, you know, I don't have slides. Didn't get that memo. But I'll just talk, you know, briefly about Pathway, and then I think we can open it up for questions and conversation. So Pathway Lending is a nonprofit community development financial institution. You may hear us throw around the CDFI term. So there's about 1,500 CDFIs in the country. Half of them are banks, depository institutions, and half of them are non-banks or non-depository institutions. We're one of the non-depository institutions. And as Kevin mentioned, you know, banks that hold customer deposits are very tightly regulated by lots of different people. We don't hold deposits. We get our money from banks. Pinnacle is one of our biggest partners. They lend us money really to serve the community of business owners that aren't quite, you know, ready for Pinnacle, or, you know, for some reason don't quite check all the boxes that you need to check for someone like Pinnacle. So one other thing I'll say about Pathway. So in addition to providing capital and loans to small businesses and small business owners, we also provide coaching and support. So that's something that you'll find at pretty much any CDFI across the country. So we say that we provide capital and capacity building services to our entrepreneurs. So actually two of our business coaches are in the back, if you guys don't mind raising your hands. Key Dawson and Ann Weber. And the goal really is, you know, wherever a business owner comes to us in that kind of capital life cycle or business life cycle, you know, maybe you're ready to apply for a loan. Maybe you have been working with Kevin for 2 months and, you know, got so close to the finish line, you got everything ready, but just, you know, there was one thing that was just a little bit off and they had to say no. You know, in that case, like you're probably ready to go for us, right? You know, you're ready to apply. It can be a pretty quick process, but a lot of folks come to us and they haven't met with a banker. They don't have a personal financial statement. They don't have a pro forma. They may have a business plan. They may not. And we can really coach that entrepreneur up to being ready to apply for capital or to seek capital from friends and family or use their own capital. But whatever that capital looks like, we try to coach our entrepreneurs up to being ready for that. So when it comes to making that loan decision, there's a few, you know, I think somewhat subtle, somewhat large differences between the way that we approach that process compared to someone like Pinnacle. So one of the things that we always say is that banks take a long look back and a short look forward. And they have to because of all the federal regulation in the customer deposits. At Pathway, we take a short look back and a long look forward. So we're still going to ask all the same questions that a bank would. We're going to want to see, you know, all the same information. But if things didn't look great 2 years ago or last year, but things are looking better now, like we may be able to jump out before a bank would with you. Or maybe you weren't in existence 2 years ago and the bank says, hey, we need 2 years of business tax returns, and you only have one or you have none. Maybe all you have is 6 months of interim financials, but that's enough for us to get started if everything else is there. One of the things that we always talk about, you know, it's really the first question that I get when I bring a deal to our team is, tell me about the entrepreneur. What's their background? What's their experience? Why are they going to be successful with this business? You know, that is forward-looking, right? But it's also backwards-looking. Like, we want to know the background of that entrepreneur, but the first question is, what's the global debt service coverage ratio in 2021? You know, it's tell me about what this person was doing the last 5 years. What's their experience in the industry? Tell me about their business plan. What are some opportunities that you see? So that's really where we, you know, it's all kind of part of that theme of taking a short look back and a long look forward. Let's see. Debt service coverage. Yeah, so kind of along those lines, you know, debt service coverage is, you know, it's a metric that looks back at your historical cash flow. So, you know, I know Kevin mentioned 1.25 is like their limit. For us, we're comfortable, as we say, 1.10. So that's not that big of a difference, but you know, I've seen such it can be a big difference. I've seen situations where, you know, again, you know, maybe the business has been on a huge growth trajectory, and in 2022, when you run the numbers, the business can't cash flow the debt that's proposed or that they're seeking. Maybe it works on 2023, or maybe it's really close, but then maybe they have some big contracts that that they just landed, that they need to get some capital to, you know, execute on those contracts, and that's a spot where we can step in. So one of the things that's it's one of the things that I love about working at Pathway, but it's one of the things that can be challenging, is that we don't necessarily have a credit box. It's not like you have to hit these 9 things, and if you do, you get approved. It's kind of like, all right, where are we scoring on these 9 factors, and can we get comfortable with the overall transaction? So we can really take a holistic perspective. I think that's most of what I wanted to cover, but yeah, go ahead, Zap.
Oh, let's give Jon a round of applause. Okay, you guys want to pull up chairs and we'll do Q&A, but I want to cover just a little thing, because I see this come up in office hours. I have a bunch of people come and they want to raise, they want capital through equity. And I'm like genuinely convinced that people want that, or they think that makes the most sense for their business, honestly, because the show Shark Tank exists, I swear. Where I'm just going to talk through like a little example. So that these are some made up numbers that I'm oversimplifying. A business come in that was already doing $500,000 a year, and they needed $100,000 to essentially get some equipment to scale up. And so they were looking for investors to give them $100,000 for, let's say, 10% of their business. So valuing the business at $1 million, their current revenue right now. And they thought that their business could get to doing at least $2.5 million in revenue each year and probably sell for 2x their revenue, so be a business worth $5 million. And so I was like breaking down the numbers. I was like, well, if you get an equity investor, in the long run, that's going to cost you $500,000. $500,000. I was like, that's a pretty big cost to get that investor in now. And typically, equity investors are looking for some sort of exit. Not always, but most typically, it's like they want to see you sell your business in at least 7 to 10 years. And I'm like, it kind of seems to me that you want to like run this business for the rest of your life. And so instead, I was like, well, why don't we go look at options for loans? Because he had gotten like turned down once. I was like, well, I think you should probably go talk to like more bankers. And it sounds like something worked out where it was way cheaper to just take a loan and just pay that interest over the next few years to be able to grow the business than equity. Now, that's not the case every single time necessarily, and oftentimes there's a lot of people who want to raise through equity because they are not eligible for debt funding. They won't be able to get a loan from a banker, but it's pretty common that people come in being like, I'm looking for an angel investor, and then I go, all right, like let's take a look at where your business is at right now, and instead I need to push them toward looking at debt instead. Does that make sense? I just wanted to cover that. So that's why I'm so glad these two are here. Anyways, what questions do you all have? Yes.
So for a business that does not have 2 years of tax returns, because I believe you said you work the numbers and you look at the trajectory, do you guys accept profit and loss statements?
Yeah. I mean, a P&L or income statement? Is that what?
Sure. Yeah. I mean,
If you don't meet the 2-year mark, let's say I'm not at 2 years yet, but I really need to take out a loan, would you guys consider a profit and loss
Well, we would look at a profit and loss statement as part of the overall financial package. That's the income statement that we would need. Now, if you only present 1 year, that would make it a little difficult, and that's where pathway lending may be a more appropriate option. Also, if there was another source of income, so this is where the guarantor could come in, where you've got a spouse or I use the old rich uncle, but there could be a business partner. There could be somebody that has income that is, with tax returns approved over many years, and they could backstop or provide the strength we need to make that loan where the business simply doesn't have the track record that we need as a bank. Pathway lending is a little different. But yeah, that's a long answer to your question. A P&L or income statement it would be required, quite frankly. But if it's only 1 year, from us, we're like, all right, we need at least 2 years as well as tax returns. But you bring in an appropriate guarantor, we may be able to get the deal done.
And I'll just say, for us, it's maybe a simpler answer. Just yes, we do. Again, it goes back to how we're regulated and what sort of oversight we have. But so it's nothing against Kevin. What we say is that if it's an existing business, maybe you've been around for 6 months, 18 months, we'll definitely want to look at your interim financials or company prepared profit and loss statement. We like to see at least 3 to 6 months of cash flow positive where the business is generating enough cash flow to pay back the debt that, from the loan that you're seeking. But as long as that's there, I definitely think that there's a case to be made when it comes to pathway.
You were telling a story earlier about the doctor that didn't want to put up his own personal assets for securing a loan. I know there's like secured and unsecured. I'm looking at a line of credit right now. We still do the one where, because I don't want to put up my house, right? For like a line of credit for my business, we can still do that. And then if I have enough business assets, is the rate the same or does the rate take a ding based on me not putting my house up?
So, when it comes to a business loan, we don't require a lien on your primary residence. SBA does, but in that particular, I didn't clarify that particular example. His son has a business and he bought the building and he wanted to take some debt out on the building. So we had a lien on the building. What I didn't have from him is both his personal guarantee and a track record for the business to service the debt. So the conversation didn't go into, hey, I need to give me your house and we can do the deal. No. For business loans, ex-SBA, which will take a lien on your house if the collateral at the business level isn't there, we're never going to require a lien on personal assets, specifically your personal property. We will require personal guarantee. So all that means is, if you in the event of default, which we have very few, in the event of default, business goes away, you become our secondary source of repayment. We haul you into court and say, all right, let's set up a payment plan that you can meet. And then we'll also, if we have a lien on business assets, we'll take those, which gets to your second question. If I have good collateral that I can go get in the event of default, that does help. It helps getting the deal done. It helps a little bit on the pricing, but what we look at in terms of pricing is really the overall relationship. And it sounds cliche and overly simplistic, but if I have your operating account for the business, I may bank you personally, I've got a good deal at the business for a business loan with some good collateral, I'm going to put my best foot forward from a pricing standpoint to not just to be competitive. Our business, like yours, I'm sure, is in a race to the bottom to provide the lowest possible rate, but we will be competitive, and that will help how I price a deal. It's like, all right, does this guy look for a transaction, or do we have a true partnership? If it's a true partnership, then you're going to get a very fair rate.
What other questions are there? Yes.
So if the business is not profitable, still new, and maybe the focus on spending is marketing to bring in the customers, what I'm hearing is, and correct me if I'm wrong, maybe not the best fit if it's investment to bring in the money and the revenue versus the revenue already being established that we can bank on, so to speak.
Yeah, I think For us, it's always difficult to do a pre-revenue or a pre-profitability company. You know, like I said, we like to see at least 3 to 6 months of that, you know, company in the black, generating profit. However, that's not to say that we've never done a startup. We do it all the time. But when we do, you know, there's a lot of other questions, and you kind of have to check a lot of other boxes. Although I say we don't have a box checking algorithm, but you know, we really want to understand what your experience is and why you're going to be successful at executing on this business plan. We want to know if there's any outside income that you can support yourself and the business as you hit your metrics and goals and get to that cash flow positive. We want to know if there's any available collateral. You know, you start kind of going down the list, and everything else has to be pretty good if you aren't at that cash flow positive point. But that's not to say that we'll never do it. The other thing, you know, I think from a timing standpoint, our first question is, in that case, when can you start paying this loan back? Because we can put it on interest only, but interest only, like you still got to make payments on interest only. So there has to be cash flow coming in somewhere, and then we don't want to have it on interest only forever. So you know, I've seen us do 12 months interest only if it's a long build out. You know, think about a brick and mortar ground up construction. You know, sometimes those can take longer. You know, 12, 18 months. But generally speaking, we really want to understand like when can this business start paying it back, and you know, second question, do we believe that they can get there and why?
What's your pricing on a deal like that?
So we're, you know, across the board, we're going to be more expensive than traditional bank financing. I would say a good rule of thumb is we're probably 2 to 3% higher than what a bank would charge on that particular type transaction now. If there's commercial real estate involved, it's a different story. But if there's not, let's just say we base our pricing off of Wall Street Journal Prime, which is 8.5 right now, and we price it Prime plus 4, so that would be 12.5.
Yes.
For entrepreneurs and other small businesses, what other factors? I know the numbers run, that pushes the weather vane, I get that. But what are those other tiebreakers that folks can think about that really get you to say, when all else is equal, that gets me a little bit more sold on this particular company? What are some of those other factors they can think about?
When applying for a loan? I mean, okay. Well, in lieu of, you know, as we go through that, I mean, if the cash flow isn't there. I mean, well, so if the answer is no, or even a maybe, check back with us in 6 to 12 months to put your best foot forward and put you in the best position to get approval 12 months. We want that relationship. How do we start with the treasury management of the deposits? Can we start a partnership there? Start the dialogue. Keep me posted on the progress of the business, which I can see by just looking at business going in or cash going in and out of the account. But if it's today and the cash flow isn't there, or we're just not comfortable from a credit standpoint, I mean, typically I would refer you to Pathway. I've got several deals right now that I've referred to asset-based lenders where there is no income. One guy sold his company, starting a sort of a very similar company towards a different market. He's about to sign some contracts with Walgreens, Walmart, and I think CVS. Came to me for a loan. I've got a 10-year relationship with him. I said, I get it. We help, you know, he's a close personal friend, but you don't have the cash flow there to support the $1 million line of credit that you need. However, I can refer you to a pure ABL or asset-based lender that's going to look at that purchase order, his inventory, which is hard inventory, and lend a percentage of that on a monthly basis. So that's a long way of saying, I mean, entrepreneurs, startup companies, to be quite frank with you, is very tough to lend into. That said, there will reach a point where we can take out an investor or a much higher priced mezz debt facility, and we've done many of those. But Getting back to my first point, whether it's today or down the road, I would argue having a relationship with a bank to at least start the dialogue with the hopes you can get a loan at some point in the future, sort of like having a lawyer, CPA, or your insurance agents. Needs are pretty minimal there, but you want them there when you need them, and that's my long answer to your question.
I think I would also recommend establishing a relationship with a bank like Pinnacle, because, like I said, we don't have the luxury or the any of that goes with it. We can't do anything for you unless we're doing a loan. However, we can provide coaching, and one of the things that I would add, like I said, we look at experience, we look at outside income, how much money you have to put into a deal, what sort of collateral you have available. Like, we can look at all those factors. I would add one other factor to that list, and that's coachability. Folks that come to us and say, I want a loan, I'm ready, let's go. And we say, hey, I think you've done a really good job on this business plan, but I'd like you to, connect with one of our business advisors. Oh, by the way, there's no cost to do so, but I think that they may be able to help you see, maybe around a corner where you have some blind spots. The quickest way for us to say no is if you don't take us up on that. A lot of our early stage requests that we get, we even, we can't require that you meet with our advisors, but that's another question that I get asked by our credit team is, tell me about their coachability. Have they met with our advisors? What sort of, are they open to coaching? Are they going to be open to our support after they get a loan from us, or are we never going to see them again? So that's another thing that we look at.
Thank you.
Can you explain why Pathway is a 501c nonprofit? I guess how that positions you in the market to maybe provide some resources that traditional for-profit organizations could.
Yeah. So I don't know if we're technically a 501c3. We may be some other, and probably no. But we are a nonprofit organization. Really what that means is that we don't have shareholders or investors. We talk about our shareholders and our stakeholders being the community that we're trying to support. Our goal every year is to generate $1 of free cash flow. So that means, every dollar that we bring in, first we got to pay our staffs and people and, cover our deposit, our loan costs, like the loans that we're taking out from folks like Pinnacle to do the work that we're doing. But really where we pour our money back is in those coaching and advisory services that we don't, we're not turning around and charging business owners for that support. So, that's really what that means, is that we have our nonprofit status, or, it's I guess by design, we're pouring all that money back into supporting the community through that, wraparound service.
What's the largest loan or size loan you make?
So we'll go up to $6-8 million on an individual transaction. That's kind of the cap. I would say on the other end of the spectrum is where we get a lot of interest and requests. So we'll go down as low as $5,000 for a business loan. And I think thinking about your question about well, what if I'm asking for $250 and I keep getting told no by everywhere? Well, maybe I can get a $5,000 or a $10,000 or a $15,000 loan and start building that relationship. So we try to provide that service.
Any other questions? Awesome. Well, I was going to say, we can have questions more one-on-one and be more individualized. We do have a lot of templates that we share at the AC about these, and I know John probably has a bunch more. And then maybe next time we can do like a Shark Tank type show, except instead of pitching your brilliant idea, you just have to come and show your income statement.
Parentheses are bad on the income statements. Or numbers in red, I learned the hard way. Those aren't good either.
Let's give them a round of applause.